One of the big themes for today, as we've been going through, is really this Australian-US collaboration. And as Graham Durant, our director of Questacon, highlighted in his opening speeches, one of the centres which in fact really inspired us was the Exploratorium in San Francisco, really a sister science centre for us, and a place which we still look to as sort of benchmarking some of the excellent inquiry-based, open-ended learning, which is critical for that creativity. And we look to them often with envy, sometimes with a bit of, real envy on there. They're just so damn good. But that's why you work with great people. And that's one of the things which is a thread also from the discussions here of finding the great people and getting them together. Recently, working with the Teacher Institute, one of the great institutions within the Exploratorium, Questacon received a bit of a thumbs up, as it were, from the Exploratorium, which still keeps me warm thinking about it in winter, was, we always go over there and see what they're doing, and we take the best ideas and bring them back. And then that envy in us, that ambition says, they're so damn good, but we come up with a twist and we take it back, and we've received the compliment back from them that they're going, it always comes back better from Australia on that. Now that's a great symbol actually of how that collaboration can operate. We'll move fairly quickly into the panel group here, and we're going to be focusing on small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurship. One of the things which Questacon does a lot of work with is really creativity and in that innovation space. And part of that is your perspective on a problem. But for the real people and the real excellence in that area, we'll be coming back to our panel. Could I ask perhaps you to introduce yourself? We're going to say a short, well, it won't be 2 minutes, but a short introduction, really looking at what your business's key areas are, and if you could reflect perhaps on how you interact with small, medium enterprise and what the space for entrepreneurs are to engage with you and your activities.
My name's Jim Minifie. I run the Productivity Growth Program at the Grattan Institute, which is a policy-focused research institute. And the reason why small and medium enterprises are important to us is because they're so important in the Australian economy. Firms with less than 200 employees employ almost 60% of private sector workers and generate well over half of output, private sector output as well. They're critically important to the overall level of productivity in the economy, and they're obviously the source of so many innovations that then go on to drive employment growth and income growth in the economy. So that's our interest. We feel that we need to understand the sector, and in my comments later on I'll explain what the link is between small and medium enterprise and the more arcane world of innovation. There are some very strong connections.
Sure. No, thanks very much. Sarah from Microsoft.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Vaughan. I'm the Director of Developer Evangelism and Experience, which is a fancy title. It basically means anyone who has a passion for software is building a business around software and technology. It's my team and I, our role to nurture and support and enable those companies. Interesting, more and more, it was in the olden days, it was a very purist kind of approach, and now in Australia, it's a high potential area in small and medium enterprises of companies who use technology that is instrumental to their success. And from Microsoft Australia, one of the things we're doing, and it's our responsibility to do, is connect the dots around the innovation ecosystem. And it's not just about startups, it's around SMEs that can use technology to be more productive. And we've done some research which shows that if even just 30% more companies that move from being a follower to a technology leader, it can increase GDP by $6 billion and have a huge impact on jobs and sustainability. And like I said before, we have a high potential in Australia. I think we are a very entrepreneurial, kind of gutsy, new ideas, give it a go kind of culture. And one of the things that I'm lucky enough and have the privilege to do is work with STEM students. And to give you an idea of some of the provocative ideas, I think Internet of Things, transparent computing. A team is competing in a worldwide competition today in the US, and they build an app to detect anemia, which kills about 27,000 people in Australia every year. And it basically captures a pixel of your eye, it calibrates it with a colour chart, and tells you whether you have anemia or not. And this is what's transformational around this kind of approach, is the technology diagnostics is higher in regards to the probability of detecting anemia than a doctor. It means that diagnosis can shift to the individual. We all wearable technology. And then from a GP perspective, which you think about small and medium enterprise, they will be more about the care, not the diagnosis. It's a tremendous shift in a very traditional type of profession in our market.
Yep.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, and certainly there is systematic recognition that in our current demographics, both Australia and internationally, that shift to an ageing population, those issues of health and healthcare are one of those critical needs and therefore an opportunity out there in the market. You know about the world.
Well, my name is Alan Noble. I'm the engineering director and essentially the lead engineer for Google's R&D activities here in Australia. Google is perhaps a little bit different from many of the multinationals that operate in Australia in that we have a very, very large R&D presence. Many multinationals would be better characterised as sales and marketing branch offices. We're not like that. We have 1,000 employees in Sydney, and almost half of those are engineers. And when I say engineer, I'm primarily talking about software engineers. So the products that we build, the products that hopefully many of you use, Google Maps, Blogger, Docs, Google Web Search, a lot of those innovations are being developed right here in Australia. We collaborate. Collaboration is at the heart of how we innovate. We work with other teams, both in the US and elsewhere. There's an interesting story that I do want to share with the audience, and that is, how many of you know that Google Maps actually started in Australia? Yeah, so now you all know Google Maps was actually a very, very small, I'd characterize it as a joint US-Aussie startup company, a 4-person startup company that was acquired by Google back in 2004 and essentially became the genesis of what is today the Google Maps product. And we still have a very, very large engineering team working on Maps-related products in Australia. I won't talk too much more in this brief intro, but I will say, be a little bit controversial when we talk about small and medium enterprise and startups, because we do need to make a very strong distinction. And while I agree with Sarah that there's absolutely opportunities for SMEs or small business to be embracing innovations and essentially becoming more productive organizations, the big opportunities are with tech startups. Tech startups, now what's confusing to many people, and in fact indeed to many policymakers, is that startups are a type of small business. They typically, or they by definition, start out life as small businesses, but they're small businesses with a couple of defining characteristics. One, they typically are going after high impact, big problems, things that can essentially address global market opportunities. And secondly, they're doing that through the use of technology. It is technology or tech that gives them their competitive advantage. In contrast, most small businesses generally don't innovate in the sense that they're producing truly new to this world innovations. They can certainly utilize innovations, but it's quite unusual for small businesses to actually be innovating at that level. And it's not necessarily in their DNA for them to do so. So I want to talk more about the role of tech startups to really drive a lot of economic wealth and obviously job creation for Australia. Yep. But I'll stop there right now.
Excellent. All right, we might come back there as a segue into that, also just looking at whether or not the innovation in the tech space is actually allowing some of that innovation in R&D, because traditional industry, R&D was a big capital investment. These days, there is perhaps scope for innovation. So let's come back to that. Lindsey.
Great. My name is Lindsey Grossman, and I lead public policy for Asia Pacific for a company called Intuit. Intuit was founded about 30 years ago, and despite being established in the tech world, we like to think of ourselves as a 30-year-old startup. In Australia, we truly are a startup. When you asked about the intersections between our company and SMEs, it's very clear. Intuit serves one customer base, and that is SMEs and startups specifically. We make cloud-based technology that helps small businesses and startups manage their finances, so QuickBooks Online. And we also make technologies out there that help startups get paid, so payments, online payments, and as well as important things like paying your employees. So we offer startups and SMEs payroll solutions. And so for us, it's very simple. We help small businesses and startups from a product perspective at Intuit. We also invest in them directly. I'm proud to say that in the past 1 year, Intuit has acquired 2 Australian startups. First is FIFO, and the second one is called InvitBox. And these two Australian startups were very much aligned with what Intuit wants to do, and that's to change the financial lives of startups. Oftentimes we talk about startups investing in the right technology and having the right people, but in fact 1 in 3 startups fail because they don't have their finances right. So these two Australian startups and Intuit were very much aligned, saying we've got to help Australian startups and global startups really manage their money in a way that leverages data to delight them and help them make better business decisions. And I would say the third way that we are really excited to interact with SMEs is specifically in the policy arena. And that's something that I have the joy of dealing with every day is sitting alongside industry and government to say, how can we actually jumpstart startup growth? What are the barriers that we have to remove when it comes to compliance and red tape? You know, the everyday things that stop companies from getting bigger and doing more. And so I'm actually really eager to talk about the area of policy and where actually together companies and government can get rid of the noise and actually get startups to the commercialization phase much quicker than they do today.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Lindsey. Ken, seeing machines,
Yep.
someone which in fact we've been working with on and off over the years from when you were in fact quite a good deal smaller.
Ken Kroeger, work with Seeing Machines. Seeing Machines, put really succinctly, we save lives. Every day we help thousands of people around the world get home safely to their families, whether they're driving a truck, plane, bus, and someday your family car. We do that by monitoring attention, fatigue, and waking them up if they fall asleep or reminding them to keep their eyes on the road. And it's my lucky day because I'm probably most qualified to talk about interacting with SMEs because we are a ex-SME compared to the Goliaths at the table here today. So I can tell you about that. I might have to flip it around. I'll tell you how SMEs engage with large multinationals. And I'm also lucky because we're based in Canberra and I can talk you guys into coming to work for us someday.
Excellent, thanks for that. One of the things you might like to sort of expand, given now that we've sort of heard across the table some of the things, but perhaps in that, if you'd like, if you could reflect on, again, because we're all about outcomes here, we're all driven, we're talking with some of the other folks earlier, where are the verbs in this, what are we going to be doing next? So what, from your perspective, needs to change to allow you to help change happen?
That's a terrific question. Let me just make one observation about, I guess, the startup versus the SME opportunity. We don't have to choose. They're both big opportunities. There's a huge opportunity to improve productivity and innovation outside of the tech space amongst that enormous mass of around 1 million small firms in Australia. And none of what we do in that space is going to take away from the opportunity in the direct tech space where you can see those moonshots paying off with gigantic income payoffs to Australians and obviously flowing through to opportunities for all of the customers of those big startups. So I think that's the first observation. There's just a broad swathe of large opportunities. The first observation is, if I can just step back and make an observation about the nature of knowledge and the economy. As economists, we're very comfortable dealing with questions about efficiency, but knowledge is a special type of output because it can be shared. And so you produce something that's costly, but then it's very, very cheap to share in some form, whether embodied in a product or through the research community. And that's why knowledge is a policy issue. You can't just rely on the market to do it because there are free riding issues. You've got to have significant investment in research to make that happen. And over time, that will spread out to the end users. So that's the first observation. The second one, though, is that getting out of the way of enterprise really does work. And I would challenge people in this room to think of a European tech giant that's been as innovative as the American ones that have been represented here today. And that's not all just path dependence going back to some early fluke. There really are policy differences that have driven US innovation. And even at the small end of the spectrum, what you see is small firms are more innovative when trade barriers are low, when they're getting competitive pressure, when they get the opportunity to collaborate with international firms that are bringing global best practice. And so the whole tension around technology and innovation policy is between, on the one hand, recognising that you can't leave it all to the market because certainly at the basic end of the research spectrum, you've got to have public engagement. But then there's this strong evidence base that says, as you get more and more applied, it is that white-hot competition that drives innovation and drives productivity. And so much of the policy making is at the boundaries between those two. Where do you step back as a government versus where do you try to support?
Yep.
And Australia has got a pretty good set of policy settings, but there are opportunities, I'm sure they'll come up in further discussion, where there are clear opportunities to either get out of the way further or more aggressively step in. So
I'd just like to build on that comment about we don't have to choose. And I agree, we should not have to choose between opportunities for SMEs and opportunities for tech startups. But we do need to make a distinction because there are different enablers and there are different drivers that will ultimately make SMEs successful or tech startups. There's commonality too. I mean, both small business and tech startups need access to capital in their early days of their existence. One thing I really want to focus on though is education. Obviously, whether you're a small business or a tech startup, the more entrepreneurially inclined graduates we're producing, the more likely we're going to be producing small businesses and tech startups alike. So getting entrepreneurship into our education system as early as possible is going to be crucial to the success of all sectors. We know that 20% of high school students that are exposed to some form of entrepreneurship education will go off to start their own businesses, not just tech businesses. So that's an incredibly, the trouble is a tiny percentage of high school students get exposed to that. So that's something, doesn't have to be an expensive thing to implement, but just getting the education system working to produce more entrepreneurial graduates. Tech startups, however, have a special set of requirements. Tech startups, by definition, require tech skills, STEM skills, computer science skills. And that's where, frankly, our education system, it's not failing in the sense that we don't produce high-quality graduates, because we do produce high-quality graduates, but we don't produce enough high-quality graduates with STEM skills, and in particular, computer science and software engineering skills. Again, another interesting statistic here in Australia, 30% of tech startups are founded by entrepreneurs that have a computer science degree. So that's more founders with a computer science degree than, say, with an MBA or a business degree. In Silicon Valley, it's even higher. It's north of 50%. So there's, again, strong correlation between computer science and STEM and engineering more broadly and entrepreneurship in the technology area. So again, our education system can do a lot more to be producing those graduates. We're only producing 12,000 computer science graduates a year. 8,000 of those are overseas students. Half of those go back to their countries. The numbers are really quite puny.
Yeah, and there are changes in the curriculum which we're bringing in, things like coding and ICT back in.
We need to hurry that up too.
To be mainstreamed, and the challenge of creating an education environment to support that so that it can grow is a live issue, and one which we're certainly trying to tackle in our small way. Ken, we might jump to you as far as picking up some of those things, and also that your perspectives on whether or not government and policy are getting out of the way that reflect perhaps on the journey from small to not so small.
Yeah, I think from an purely Australian perspective, I can't speak outside of Australia, but the every business I've been in would never have made it without government support. So the EMDG, R&D, grants, ICON, local stuff, national stuff, state stuff are all a big part of the funding mechanism in this country, and if it disappeared tomorrow, and a lot of it is, gradually being whittled away, I know I wouldn't be where I'm sitting today. The company wouldn't be here anymore, and my previous business wouldn't have made it either. Yeah.
No, thanks, Ken. What needs to change to help you help change?
I think one of the, back to the intersection between startups and tech startups and SMEs is culture. And one of the key things about being entrepreneurial is risk-taking. And I think one of the panelists, David from Cyro, talked about the appetite to fail. And I think as a big company, one of the responsibilities we have is around supporting and enabling companies who are taking risks, or even tech startups who really need access to people who can help them, so coaching, tech skills, business skills, but also to the network of customers and partners and distribution that we have the fortune to have. And on the flip side, from a culture perspective and risk-taking, those companies that are established to challenge the status quo from a culture perspective and say, right, I'm willing to give this disruptive technology or this startup or this company with a new idea a go, because I understand that I need to innovate. But that comes down to a pretty seismic shift in culture, which I think is probably the hardest thing we have to do, but doesn't mean we shouldn't tackle it.
Yeah. Excellent, thanks. Lindsay, and then we will throw over to the questions.
Yep. So going back to the distinction between SMEs and startups, I want to say very clearly that Intuit actually sees both of them as different customers, but indeed one that we serve. So we provide tools to a startup maybe early in their age. As they grow and become massive enterprise, maybe they need to go to a different enterprise solution. But there's also, we need to recognize some small businesses are happy with being the size that they are. And going back to something that Jim said, small businesses are the backbone of Australia's economy, so we're really, really clear that we have to make sure that even the mom and pop small businesses know how to use technology in their everyday lives. So when you go back to the question of what needs to change, very clearly I think that we need to see more small businesses using technology in their day-to-day lives. I've been amazed and blessed to be able to work with a lot of our customers who are using technologies in ways we just couldn't think about before. In fact, one of them is sitting in the audience today, Amelia Priest. Amelia is an Australian startup who is based in Sydney, and she is importing and redistributing healthy snacks. Her company is called Just Snacks, and of course she uses our product, but I had a deep conversation with her to try to understand how else is she using technology in her everyday business. It's unreal. So for example, she has sourced actually American labor from a place called Georgia, a state in the South, thanks to a cloud platform called Elance. So the person who's doing all of her social media and a lot of her content writing for her websites is actually a deaf American who may have had challenges finding work otherwise. But thanks to the cloud and internet-enabled services, she's been able to get a job and actually to help a startup in Australia get legs. And just from all the perspectives that we see, if you're exporting to one country, there's no reason you shouldn't be exporting to 10 at the same time, thanks to all the e-commerce platforms that are out there. So going back to your original question, I think we need to encourage more small businesses, including the everyday mom and pop small business, to use technology, to have data at their fingertips to make better financial decisions, and to really access the global economy. I think Australian startups are actually better than the United States startups in many sense. If you look at in the US, about 90% of American companies that are exporting are SMEs. But if you look at the value of those exports, only a third of that value comes from small businesses. And even further, the 60% of those small businesses who are exporting are only doing to one country. I think Australia, given the geography where they are and the mindset that you have here, really have something to teach American small businesses of how to be global and how to leverage technology. So I hope to see more of that.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Open to the floor. We've already had one question from there, but you're still have the question? Thanks. We got the microphone through over there.
Hi, my name is Blasis, and I'm from Narrabundah College. I'd like to ask this question to you, Alan. I believe that technology today is biggest and still growing man's lifelong partner. And in its growth, I believe that the balancing the support and respecting the fundamental human rights, such as privacy, is by far the biggest concern. And so how is Google, as the leading company for this modern interaction, keeping the technology under control of men and yet maximizing the potential our technology holds?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking. Just a high-level comment first. I mean, any company, and whether you're an internet company or in a more traditional sector, the trust of your users and the trust of your customers is everything. From the smallest company to the biggest multinational. So we work very hard to ensure that we do have the trust of our users. Ensuring privacy and data security is a big part of ensuring that we do achieve that trust. Technology it's funny. We are living in a fantastic, exciting new digital age. Where we're always connected to these devices. I can't even come up here without my smartphone. Everything's in the cloud. We're always on. We're always connected. So on the one hand, exciting and lots of opportunities. On the other hand, perhaps a little bit scary. So it is about making sure that we do have those, those safety mechanisms in place to ensure privacy and security as well. So I guess the short answer is we take that very, very seriously in how we design and build our products. And I think most companies would really take a very similar view, because you lose the trust of your users, you lose your business. It's that simple.
Any other questions? Yes, up the back. Can we have a microphone up?
Thanks. This is a question for both, or either Lindsay and Jim, I think it was, yeah. Regarding, I guess for small businesses, Lindsay, you talked about technology and uptake and better use of technology, but I guess also that broadening out to knowledge capture and knowledge management, and at the heart of that being whether you're a tech startup or an established small business, but you're trying to grow your business, how do you make sure that you're capturing all of that and you're making the best use of it going forward? Is that something, I guess just your general views about that in the context of both, I guess, a business system type of perspective as well as more broadly, how does that enable growth of the SME community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So at Intuit, we talk about data to delight. For us and our customers, more importantly, they've got to be able to have data at their fingertips to know, what their sales were last month, right? To be able to anticipate trends in seasonal cash flow, right? To be able to estimate what their next job costing should be. And they also need to know, do they have enough cash, enough funds to be able to hire the next employee that they would need to hire in order to grow. And so we actually built, with that mindset, we actually built our products to make sure that they're using data for the customer in a way that provides value. So we're an accounting system, right? Sounds pretty boring. But if you look at the product, actually the insights that we're able to actually give the customers are really profound. People are able to better spend their time. They don't have to go trailing through all these books and crunch numbers. The graphs and the trends are right there inside the product for them. And so that's really the mindset that we share as a company, is that big companies should not be the only individual or organizations that have access to data in insightful ways. We want to, we call it big data for the little guy. That's what we're all about at Intuit, is making sure that these small businesses have the benefit of those insightful tools to be able to make better decisions.
Well, look, Lindsay, I think you've said it very well, but if you compare where we are now to 5 years ago, the ability for a small organisation to access sophisticated tools offered online through the internet has just exploded. It's totally levelled the playing field on a whole set of dimensions, and it's providing a platform for innovation by firms both in and outside of the tech space that I think 5 years ago none of us could have anticipated. It's nowhere near exhausted. I think it's a huge opportunity.
There we go.
Thank you.
Cloud source to
My name's
solution.
Andrew Moss. I'm a teacher at Dixon College. We've talked a lot today about how the world is really changing. We've talked about how the education system is becoming more online. We've talked about how the entrepreneurs of today are not the same kind of entrepreneurs they were 10, 15 years ago. One of the things that we see in the schools, and all the students can attest to this, is that students are much more capable now in the tech sense than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the entrepreneurship that's going on with this age of students is they're a lot more capable than they were, again, a while back. Just want to put the question to the panel about what do you think needs to be done in the high school system to foster that entrepreneurship and that drive to do business at a much younger age than we traditionally have looked at before.
Thanks, Andy. Good question. Who would you like to start?
Sure. So, look, there's an explosion of new tools for students to use to learn how to start a business, to learn how to code, and to learn how to pull those things together. One of the themes that we talk about at Grattan is the T-shaped capability that I think all of us need to develop now, which is you've got to be deep in one or more areas in order to really be able to add value as the expert that the rest of your team needs you to be. But you've also got to have some breadth as well. So that applies both to STEM students who need to be sufficiently au fait with the world of whether it's business or a non-profit startup, community startup, to be able to function as an effective owner of that expertise. Or if you're a business or other student, you need to be sufficiently across STEM. So I think one of the implications of that is that You need to ensure that students have got that breadth, but are also developing depth. And then beyond that, just pick and choose between the incredible variety of tools that make it so low cost to start an operation now compared to where we were a few years ago. The cost of getting up to speed and bringing something to market or making it a reality is just much lower thanks to those cloud-based tools.
Yeah, Sarah.
Great curriculum and inspiring teachers and access to people who, maybe not teachers in your community that can inspire students. I think that it's not limited to a classroom or a campus anymore, that it's about finding like-minded people who share your passions as students. I have access to a staggering number of students who, they might be 16 or they might be 22, who are doing incredible things with technology. And the difference, if I could think about the difference between them and me, it was an incredible sense of curiosity and access to information and ideas. So somehow stimulating that curiosity as a fundamental aspect of our students and our teachers, I think would be probably one of the one key to making a big difference around fostering that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, and I strongly second inspiring teachers to inspire students is at the heart of this. We're really talking about cultural change. The previous panel touched on that slightly. It's really encouraging students to be less risk averse and more tolerant of taking risks and occasionally failing and learning from those experiences. So I think in terms of moving, I guess, greater student adoption towards entrepreneurship, that's really the thing that has to change most of all. In terms of the practical inputs that go into creating a tech startup, really getting coding taught early and all through our school system would be invaluable. And there's been a lot of other countries that have taken the initiative to get coding taught from K through, well, in some countries K through 12. Vietnam's doing it K through 12. We have a new digital technologies curriculum that's yet to be ratified, at least gets it, not coding, but at least gets digital technology instruction up to year 10. I would say get it all the way up to year 12, please. It would be fantastic. So a few changes like that could make it. But, education and teaching is what it's all about.
I was going to say, there's probably every corporate has programs and support for students who are interested in coding, and it's probably just teachers finding out those resources and getting access to them. There's not a lack of curriculum or programs or software or courses. It's a matter of finding the people who'll connect the dots between the classroom and those programs.
Yeah, certainly from our perspective, that gap between the resources are available, but the comfort to use them is a real challenge.
There's probably two things that I would say, one of which you're very clearly already doing, which is get out of the classroom. The fact that all of you are here is amazing. I've never been to a policy event in Washington, D.C. or in London where I live and had students there asking the best questions in the room. So good on you for that. Also what I mean in getting out of the classroom, engaging conversations like this, but also actually building on companies' platforms. A couple of years ago, Intuit re-engineered our platform and actually opened all of our APIs so that an individual sitting in this room who cares about small businesses being smart about money could actually build an app and integrate it into the QuickBooks Online platform. We really enabled that data to be accessible to an individual developer in their basement or in their classroom. So that would be the other way that I would encourage teachers and students is to just start building on some of these platforms. Go build an Android app, right? Test it out and really bring these things to marketplaces, because now more than ever, thanks to open platforms, this is accessible to you. The second thing that I would say, and I would stress this for any student, but especially those in the science and engineering field, is get some early financial management skills. This is coming to you as not necessarily motherly advice, but I think really good business advice. So I think the stat was, 30% of founders are going to be having engineering background. Well, as a founder of a startup or a company, you need to make smart money decisions, right? You can't just rely on your accountant to tell you your cash flow every 5 seconds, and you can't rely on your accountant to take the right informed risks. So do get a little bit of financial management experiences, even if it's a basic financial literacy course. It will help you in your day-to-day life with your family when you own your first house. It will also help you in managing a company when you start one.
Excellent, thanks. Ken, you were smiling to yourself over there about the...
I guess just more of a local plug again. There's a wealth of tools available and people in this city to help you. Organizations like Lighthouse, Entry 29, Griffin Accelerator, ACT Innovation Hub, ICON, and on and on and on. There is no minimum age limit to get into those things. There's boot camps, hackathons, workshops, Canberra Business Council. They're all out there. They're all almost free, and they would love to hear from you and help you.
Yep, thanks. Perhaps one more question if there's... That was a very quick hand, so it's obviously a passionate question. That'll be the last one for the day. Yes.
Is it on? Con Giorgio from 1 Million Acts of Innovation. What you guys are covering totally resonates. We're actually building a 1 million teenpreneur program for 12-year-olds to 20-year-olds. I've got a couple of schools in Sydney who are willing to risk their jobs to disrupt and kick out the HSC. Awesome. So taking entrepreneurialism as the route to learning maths, economics, science, blah, blah, blah. The question is, what cultural architecture does Australia need to become a top 5 nation for innovation by 2020? Because culture is culture, but you actually have to do it on purpose sometimes. And well, 21st century culture must change from 20th century culture.
Thanks for a question which will make it entirely simple for us to go and stick to time on that.
Let's tackle it now.
Probably limit the answers.
Yeah.
So
let me, we've got most of it in place. The one thing that we need to do better is to 100% welcome skilled migration in the areas that are going to complement what we already know how to do. When you look around the world, those cultures that are open and that are willing to risk some disruption in return for being able to embrace the best of what the world can bring in terms of its quote-unquote human capital are the ones that are most innovative. And we need to do better on that front.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yep.
So I'll go back to when I lived in Silicon Valley. I lived there for 16 years, and you would probably safe to say that's the quintessential entrepreneurial culture and tech entrepreneurship at that. One thing that's remarkable there is everyone understands entrepreneurship, everyone understands tech. They may not necessarily be in a startup themselves, but they know someone who is, or they have a friend or a family member who is. We don't have that culture today. We have no shortage of smart people, we have no shortage of entrepreneurial skills, we have no shortage of tech talent, but it's not pervasive. I would love one day to have a conversation with a typical parent of a typical public school about what their kids are doing, and they say, well, my kid wants to be an entrepreneur when they graduate. That conversation doesn't happen today. People don't know what an entrepreneur is, and they really don't know that it's actually a valid career pathway. So it's really about broadening that cultural base of what entrepreneurship is. We are a nation of small businesses, but again, back to my earlier point, we need to make a distinction between needs-based entrepreneurship, which is really about SMEs, and technology entrepreneurship, which is about tackling big problems. And so that's the biggest thing I'd like to see. And if we could basically have this forum is fantastic, but have that common understanding of what the opportunities are.
Yep. I'm getting the time pressure here. Perhaps if there's one more, a gentle time pressure. Anyone else on the panel here like to particularly tackle that one?
Say, continue to embrace a global mindset. I think Australia is really great at that. I think there's other parts in the country that can really increase the adoption of technology and the global mindset, but really learning from all people, going and experiencing other places and bringing that technology and that insight back home in Australia, I think is really key.
Yeah, and I'd expect there is a groundswell happening in many of these directions. It's a question of just following it, recognising that it's available and adding your own weight and your own momentum to it. Some of the universities now are not offering MBAs, they're offering Masters of Entrepreneurship, Masters of Innovation. So there are changes happening. I
just want to make a point. I'm going to be provocative. I think we have an entrepreneurial culture in Australia. We have great universities, we have great curriculum. We had about 170 new startups join our program every month, tech startups. I think there's a gap between what happens once they get their idea to getting access to the funding and people who can help them. It exists in Australia, we just need to connect the dots. And that's a matter of people standing up and who's interested to participate together. But I think we have an amazing culture around entrepreneurialism and ideas and gutsy, let's just get it done. And it's core to the DNA of our country.
Excellent.
I'm off my platform now.
and a good platform. Matt.
Well, and connecting the dots between the United States and Australia in this area is really what this roundtable is all about, and it's really what we hope to be able to achieve over a period of time. So I think we'll just stop there, and we won't pose any more questions from the Twitter sphere. But please join me in welcoming or thanking our panel.